completely and not just taking a broad overview, but really narrowing it down and then getting very specific, right? Categorizing some of the things that Gary mentioned. So very informative. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you. Very informative and giving us information of how do we fix our website. And I think one of the big things Gary talked about is first we've got to look at it, know what's going on, get a better understanding of all the things that come along with it. So one of the things that also, speaking of websites and looking into things, I want to encourage everybody, make sure that you have our mobile app downloaded. There are a lot of sessions going on, and I've talked to many people and said, hey, I missed this session, but I wanted to still get some information. Remember, on the app, for any of the sessions that maybe you missed or that you attended and wanted more information, there are handouts within the mobile app. So therefore, you can go to the session that maybe you either attended or wanted to attend, and then in there, when you scroll to the bottom, there'll be a section where those handouts will be available. That way you don't have to depend on screenshots. Also, don't forget, we have some great things going on over in the North Hall. You can actually take the Skywalk here, where you'll be able to see our EV timeline. As we know, all dealers are all in for EV, and we want you to have a history of behind where EVs have come from, but also where they're going in the future. And you're going to get a great example of that as you walk through the Skywalk on your way to the North Hall. When you get to the North Hall, you will find our EV Solution Center. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about EVs and how they are impacting and what they're going to be doing to our industry and how we all have to be ready to adapt, because they are coming up next and going to continue to be prevalent and a part of the conversation. And so our EV Solution Center is one where maybe if you have some questions that you want to deep dive into, we're going to give you that opportunity with some subject matter experts where you can get more information about the EV stuff. Now, also, if you just have general NADA questions and you have more things that you want to get information from NADA, don't forget to visit us in our pavilion right here inside of the West Hall. Just go into your left and you will see us there with the circular orange banner, so you cannot miss that, all right? Other than that, I'm glad you guys are here. We're going to continue our sessions this afternoon. Don't forget, later this afternoon, we are going to be streaming the general session from here. So if you did plan to attend the general session later this afternoon, I believe it's about 2 or 3, you can actually still be comfortable here. We will be streaming it on the screen, so you don't have to go far. All right. Other than that, let's go ahead and continue forward with our sessions. And up next, as soon as I get my iPad open, that's always the fun part, is when the iPad doesn't want to open. Up next, we're going to hear from one of our gold sponsors. So this is actually sponsored by IHS Markit. And what we're going to be discussing next is how the dealer of today can serve the EV customer of tomorrow. So it's one of the reasons I want to talk to you guys about the EV and learning more about it. So again, how the dealer of today can serve the EV customer of tomorrow. So we're going to have that moderated by Kristen Balasia. She is the VP and Consulting Service of S&P Global Mobility. We're also going to be joined on stage by Michael Hayes, who is the director of the NADA Academy. Chris Neff, who is our EV dealer training specialist for Plug in America. Bradley Farr, who is the OEM dealership specialist for Center for Sustainable Energy. And Chris Potigier, who is our product marketing manager for Automotive Mastermind. All right, Kristen, are you there? Come on out, Kristen. There she is. She's got a fancy mic like me. There you go. I like that. Kristen, it is all yours. Take it away.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon. How's everyone doing? Hope everyone can hear me okay. It's a lot more crowded than it was at 10 a.m. this morning. I'd like to thank you for joining us today for this panel. Hopefully it'll share some information that maybe you're not aware of, and it'll help you plan for the future. We'll be talking about how the dealer of today can serve the dealer of today can serve the EV customer of the future. I'm Kristen Balasia. I'm Vice President with IHS Markit, now S&P Global. We're proud to announce that just last week, we completed a merger where IHS Markit, the automotive team, as well as Automotive Mastermind and Carfax, are part of a new division within S&P Global called S&P Global Mobility. So we're going to take just a minute and introduce that through a video. Everyone likes to watch videos. And then we'll share some EV insights to set the stage for our discussion.
There are over 1.5 billion vehicles on the road today that all have something in common: the essential intelligence of S&P Global Mobility. We provide invaluable information across the entire value chain, enabling vehicle manufacturers, suppliers, dealers, and consumers to make decisions with conviction. Our proprietary data is used to set pricing, plan future production, determine demand, and accurately predict make and model preferences. We give consumers powerful and intuitive tools to help them buy vehicles, understand what they're worth, schedule service, and decide when to sell. And as the industry undergoes its most profound shift since mass production, our data and expertise provide forward-looking insights to improve sustainability and advance innovations such as electrification, autonomous driving, and digital retail. The next chapter in automotive history is being written. Pioneering decisions are being made using the essential intelligence of S&P Global Mobility.
Thank you. So with that, we wanted to share some insights as we talk about EVs and frankly, why the dealership today should care. When you say the BEV, the battery electric vehicle market is growing exponentially, that's an understatement. I think there's a tendency to think about the last couple of years where EVs were a pretty narrow story, right? We've heard EVs are coming, but in pretty small scale. One, maybe two or three specific OEMs or offerings, a California story, right? Almost 35, 40% of the market was not only in California, but a handful of zip codes. We look at the brands. There were 6 last year, and a couple of years before that, there were only 3. The charging infrastructure, one of the things that really slows consumer adoption, less than 1 million. And by the way, over 90% of those are private in-home charging. We're not seeing them on every corner. Maybe a couple dozen models. But let's talk about the transition that we're going to experience over the next several years. By the end of the decade, 90% of the EV models will come from those other than Tesla, from traditional brands, mainstream brands, luxury brands that have franchise dealer networks like all of yours. And figuring out how to effectively sell those is going to be really crucial. Again, we talked about, it's a California story, or it's a few states across the country. Sure, today, maybe, but that's changing rapidly. By the end of the decade, almost 90% of the EV sales will occur outside of California. Consumers will have over 20 brands to choose from, most of yours out there, and 10 times as many choices. They will be coming into your dealerships asking about what you have to offer in an EV. They will be competitively shopping your vehicles against competitive EV offerings. And there'll be almost 12 million charging points, making consumers feel more and more comfortable that this is a path that they can go down and really commit to as a family or as an individual. So what does that mean for the dealers? The average dealership expense is about $300,000 to support this EV transition. It's funded through a variety of ways. I'm sure many of you know, some directly from dealers, some from OEM and other co-ops. 2/3 of that traditionally come from the EV charging infrastructure. But 1/3 of that is the other things that you as dealers do, the tools, the training, the marketing. So how do you make sure that that's spent in the right time, in the right way, to really have the effect that you're looking for? Now the tricky part is, and this is what we're going to spend a lot of our time talking about, is the complexity. It's not an out with the old, in with the new. I think you're all very aware, you're not going to wake up January 1st of next year or the year after and not have to sell and service traditional combustion engine vehicles. But you can't ignore the EV vehicles that are coming. As you can see, even by the end of the decade, it's probably going to be somewhere around 70-30 split in regards to sales. So your employees are going to have to know how to answer those questions, sell, and maintain. To complicate things even further is the service. We all know the average age of the vehicle out on the road is about 12 years. So if we look at just a service window of a 7-year time frame, almost 80% or just over 80% of those vehicles are still going to be ICE vehicles. So now think about your technician, your service base, your capabilities, your marketing. You're going to have to support both of these things. And again, what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about is how do you manage that transition effectively? Not to lose customers coming in, not to lose revenue opportunities, but not to maybe over invest in areas when and where you don't need to. So with that, I have a lot of smart people here with me today. We'll move to the panel portion. And I'm going to start with asking Michael a question that I know many of us have probably heard over a period of time. But Michael, what would you say when you hear people say, dealerships don't want to sell electric vehicles?
Well, I won't use a term that I would use because this is a public crowd, but I would say realistically, you know, when you think about our jobs as what we've done, our careers as auto dealers, is to serve customers' transportation needs. Every auto dealer I've ever met, as long as our customer has a need, we're going to go ahead and supply it. That's what we do. Otherwise, we're going to be out of business. So when we think about it, it's not like we would be selling electric vehicles. We're selling a transportation solution that someone wants, and that what someone needs, and that fits their actual needs. That's what we do. So absolutely, do auto dealers want to be in the EV business? They are, if they want to be selling cars in 2030, 31, and 32. And I believe that's what we're there. I think the big thing is that we're in different phases depending on which area of the country that we're in. You mentioned California. So if I'm in California, I'm in the EV business because it's pretty big there. If I'm in around New York City, if I'm in Washington, D.C. area, if I'm in Atlanta, areas like that, I am in the EV business. Other parts of the country, maybe a little slower, but every dealer, I truly believe, will sell EVs, wants to sell EVs, if that's what our customers want. And we're seeing that adoption rate going higher and higher and higher, as you showed earlier.
Absolutely. So, Chris, you have an interesting background. Chris Neff, I'll distinguish here. So maybe talk a little bit about that from an actual, person who has enjoyed and driven EVs for over a decade. But then if you could go into, as we saw, the offerings are going to explode really, 10 times by 2030. But the sales don't necessarily match that. So how do dealers prepare for that now for what's coming?
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. So I'm a car guy. I used to restore muscle cars back in high school, so I love the V8. I got my first taste of an EV back in 2007, and it was an e-Box, which is a converted Scion XB. Pulled the car out of the garage, took it out in the parking lot, and hit the accelerator. I was hooked. So fast, instant torque, and these cars move. Then we got to take it out on the road. We were dusting people at the traffic light left and right. They couldn't believe it. It was silent. It basically kicked butt. So I got my first EV to actually drive every day. It was a Mini E. This BMW had a program. They had a converted Mini Cooper. They put a battery pack into it. It was really, really fast. That's the thing about EVs. They're quick, and they handle really well because of low center of gravity. I'm on my 7th EV. I now have a BMW i3. Love it. It's I have cars that I've restored. They've been sitting in my garage for over 8 years. I drive my EV every day just because I don't get bored of it. It's fun. It's a conversation piece as well. People look at it, having fun with it. I don't have to hug a tree. I like to sit under trees. I do like to drive, and EVs meet those demands. There's a big selection now of EVs. A few years ago, as Kristen had mentioned before, there was a few models out there. There are over 50 models available now, and there's dozens more coming. So customers have a choice, not just about an EconoBox or an expensive luxury cruiser. Now they have an SUV, they have a CUV, they have a nice sedan, they have a saloon, etc. There are lots and lots of choices.
Thanks. So we'll go to the other Chris now. We talked about saying dealers, what's the real deal? Do dealers want to sell EVs? I think the next question is, do consumers really want to drive EVs? We did a recent study that showed that in 2019, about 40% of the people surveyed said they would consider an EV. Today, that number's doubled. Just over 80% of consumers surveyed said that they are considering or would seriously consider an electric vehicle. So, Chris, my question for you is, how do dealers find those people, market to them in a different way, and really convert those, those interested to those that actually buy?
Thanks, Kristen. Big question there. I think it's probably a question on everyone's mind. I mean, dealers are starting to sell EVs today. We're still very much in that early phase. Michael touched on it earlier. I think the big realization here is that we're really fulfilling that need for a customer, right? But I think it's our job to also educate the customer at this early phase around some of the benefits and understand what those motivating factors are for the customer. So I think it really comes down again to the motivation, the motivational drivers that stand behind the EV purchase. And just like we have a difference in motivation between buying a Ford Fusion versus a BMW M5, we're going to see a difference on an individual dealer level and at a customer level between a Chevy Bolt purchase versus a Tesla or Porsche Taycan Turbo. These are two different buys. And I think for dealers, what's really important now is just to understand your customer, what is leading them to consider and buy your electric vehicles. I've had some conversations with customers. I've driven EVs myself. One example of this would be customers that are, frequenting your service drive, know your shop foreman on that first name basis. Maybe for these customers, EVs are high up on their consideration set because it brings a new level of reliability. There's fewer moving parts, less goes wrong. This would be one of those reasons. But there's many different ways you can filter and start to target, identify those customers. Finance versus lease is one of those ways. Customers that live in their own home, own a house, and have access to off-street parking so they can actually charge the vehicle overnight. That's another way. So I think, just getting to know your customers, understanding what drives them, starting to develop a portfolio and having those conversations, I think that's probably the best way to start. You don't have to be selling 50% of your sales being EV tomorrow. This is going to be something that starts now and starts to build upon and grow for sure, but I think it's just get in the game today.
I'd like to add to that. One of the resources that are available to dealers, and it's free, there are drive events all throughout the US. So if you could Google National Drive Electric Week and Drive Electric Earth Day, those are events where EV folks gather. They are shopping for EVs, they're sharing their information. It's free, you can join. That's one way to meet those potential customers. And if a dealer shows up, they welcome you. In fact, most of the organizers of these events are looking for dealers to come and bring EVs. And the people that are coming to these events are absolutely interested in buying an EV. And when they see you there, EV drivers are extremely loyal. They like that, and they'll recommend you. And again, most of these are available. Just Google those two events that I mentioned. You'll see all across the U.S.
I think that's a good segue, Chris. So Brad, you're on a mission to decarbonize. Thank you. As we see the spread from California, where I know you're largely focused, 90% will soon be out of the rest of the country. What do you see, or what other things do you see that a dealer can help address in increasing or accelerating that EV transition?
Yeah, thanks for the question.
I think
it's really important to address this because I'm with Center for Sustainable Energy. We're a nonprofit program administrator, so we run several state incentive programs, most notably California, which is known as the CVRP, or Clean Vehicle Rebate Project. Over 10 plus years, we've processed almost $1 billion of consumer rebates to almost 300,000 customers. So we have extensive interaction with EV customers. We hear a lot of their questions, their concerns, their dealership experiences, and things like that. We also have a dealership outreach team that does webinars and trainings and some certification and things like that in California. So we kind of see both sides of the fence. And there's certainly a disconnect. There's certainly room for improvement. And at least from our perspective, one of the biggest and the easiest things you can do is really just know the incentives. So some of the EV nuances. We know that you know the product, you know the specs, just as you would for your entire lineup. But when it comes to EVs, it's very important to take care of the EV customer because they look at the salesperson as the EV expert. And oftentimes, the customer does their own research, and then they tend to know more than the salesperson. That's a big problem. So to overcome that, I think one of the easiest things you can do, especially if you're maybe new to the EV game or lower volume, is have an EV specialist, have a go-to person. It's not asking for a big investment. It's not asking for a lot of time. It's just asking for a go-to person to really know their incentives. So that goes from the top with the federal tax credit, and then depending on your state, there may be a state rebate program. Depending on the local utility, sometimes there's local utility programs. Which ones stack with each other. So when the customer goes in, they're really given a value proposition and kind of shown the full total cost of ownership, not just here's the car, and then later they find out, and I get this bonus money, and that's not factoring in and really used as a selling tool as an incentive like it's designed to.
Yeah, Maybe I can also just add to that. I think one of the important realizations as dealers is around the role as well of the dealership. So I think, the OEMs will be pushing the brand awareness messages, purchasing those billboards, Super Bowl ads, radio spots, that type of thing. I think when it comes to enabling EV buyers, I think it's really important to have that direct discussion with them. And by that, I mean direct mail, email. These are the types of platforms that you're going to be wanting to use. And then starting to integrate some of those EV benefits that Brad was talking about, making sure that in this communication, you're talking about the convenience of charging, you're talking about the tax credits, both federal level as well as state level rebates. And, obviously working for Mastermind, that's one of the things that we do really well, but we'll be looking to leverage additional data points and build on top of the information that we have on these consumers, what access do they have to HOV lanes, potential state and federal tax level rebates, these types of things, so that, I think right now at this very early phase, it's about education, it's building trust, and making sure that as dealers, you are the subject matter experts for that customer related to EV knowledge.
And if I may, taking that one step further, the numbers are all really important, but I think any of us that have ever sold cars before, it's the driving the car that closes the deal. It's being in a vehicle, and especially if the vehicle is different than what we had before. The car might look the same, but to be able to feel and do it, and Chris said it twice, what got him hooked was the drive. He drove one. And what gets other people hooked is a drive. They get to drive one. And this is why we feel so strongly that all of us in the room, the dealers in the room, are going to have to scale this thing. Right now, the numbers are 4%, a little less than 4% of sales. Well, to get it to 8 and then get it to 12 and get it to 16 and get it to 20 or whatever it's got to be by 2030 or 2035, according to our OEMs, it is up to the dealers to be able to have a car there, to handhold somebody, to show them how this works. If you've never driven an EV before, a modern EV, and you put somebody in the car and they step on it, wow, that smooth acceleration, then they let off the pedal and it goes like this, and they don't know what that is, you've lost them, okay? The ability to have somebody drive the car for an afternoon, a day, even overnight, is going to be key to getting people involved in these vehicles. They're going to be a part of what we do. And we're a huge part of scaling this to do the thing that is what we're trying to do with electric vehicles, is to create a better environment for the US. That's really what the whole issue is for the whole world. Driving the car is everything to closing the deal. The numbers are greatly important. But until they drive it, last time I sold a car was, did they like the car and did the payment fit my budget? I don't think that's different for most people.
Yeah,
One
I think
last.
that certainly they go together. One thing I'll mention is probably not talked about a lot at this show, but a lot of the EV-only startups, direct sales model, if you will, customers, if they're not satisfied with maybe some of their questions that they have for their salesperson, they may go to the direct-to-sales competitor. Those car companies, that's all they do, so they know all those answers. So they know, you may look at that as your competitor, but you have to compete by knowing some of the stuff that they talk about every day. Even if you only sell an EV every once in a while, and the salesperson may be new, and I know you go through a lot of high turnover and stuff like that. Training on an EV may not be the first and foremost thing that you do, but it's important to have at least one go-to person there that may be your specialist. And if, as you ramp up your EV sales, have more and more people that are really well versed in all the incentive programs out there.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about service. I think one of the other kind of scary music in the background is EVs don't need any service. Well, first of all, we all know that's not true. Maybe it's less, but we've studied loyalty for decades, and one thing that always comes up is people that service at their dealer are more loyal. So if you have less touch points and opportunities to do that, I've talked to a few of you. I think you all had some great ideas maybe to share. How do you continue to stay engaged with a customer, a family, a community when you have less opportunities to interact with them with the EV?
Yeah, maybe I can take that first. Like you said, I mean, the majority of these, and I think you showed a graph on this earlier, is that the majority of vehicles in operation today are ICE vehicles, right? So this transition is happening. It's happening pretty quick, but it's not going to happen overnight. So the majority of cars coming through the service drive are still going to be internal combustion engine vehicles for some time. I think the important thing to realize is that one of the reasons why customers potentially bought that EV in the first place was to avoid having to come back as frequently to the shop. So that is definitely a concern, let's say, from a fixed ops side. But I do, we also have to focus on all of those customers, the 80% of customers through 2030 that are going to continue to service at your dealership, and make sure that you focus on service retention. Loyalize those customers, keep them loyal to your dealership, and then, over time, bring them back to potentially consider another internal combustion engine car or an EV. So I think, again, maintaining that relationship, the engagement, communicating them, and making sure you don't lose that customer to another dealership during that usage phase is important too.
And plus, we'll do things that we've always done as dealers. I mean, like Brad mentioned earlier about having a specialist in sales. We have a specialist in service. And when we first started selling a lot of diesel engine trucks, I had to get a diesel engine specialist. We're going to have an electric vehicle specialist, especially in the battery and the propulsion system. I mean, we're going to have that. You're going to have a lane dedicated to that, or at least a lane that's where my EVs will go, which will have the safety items that you have to have inherent when you're dealing with 300, 400, 500 volt batteries and things like that. But that's stuff that we have always done as dealers. We've always adapted to get these new. This is not something new, and I don't know why people think it is, because it isn't. It's just a different form. Look at it this way. It's a real positive, the fact that, it's not going to be easy for the local tire store to be able to service these vehicles. They're very high tech, and those are things that we're going to be good at. We're going to have the advanced information to make this happen. We're going to have the tools and the facility to be able to service that. They are not, they're maintenance free, but they aren't repair free. There are cars, they're on the road all the time. They're hitting bumps. You're driving in cold weather and hot weather. Things happen to all kinds of systems, HVAC systems, navigation systems, electrical items. Those things are still going to be there. That hasn't changed. And we need to be there to be able to service it. Again, if we're going to scale this thing, you aren't going to do it all direct. It just isn't going to happen.
Yeah, just another idea. I'm sorry. Another idea. Charging. I know a lot of your OEMs may require chargers, but there may be opportunity to charge for the charging, but that's a service that you're offering your customers, whether they charge there daily or as needed. Maybe they stop in once a month or whatever, but they're still coming to your dealership to charge up their vehicles. I've seen it from anywhere from downtown Los Angeles to rural Texas or wherever. There's different dynamics of how you set up your chargers and if you're charging for it and how much you charge and all that. But being able to at least offer it to your customers, I think is big, and it keeps them coming in. And then, even though they're not there for oil changes and things like that, when they need tires and brakes, they're coming to you for that.
Just to quickly add to that, you should install chargers out at your dealership and make sure they're accessible. Make your dealership a destination. Talk to your marketing team. Make sure that they're contacting that customer, giving them tips and tricks about their EV. It could be simple as suggesting an app for them to download to find chargers. When they come, you welcome them. The service department, little things go a very long way for EV drivers. After you service the car, charge it up. I know you don't fill up a gas tank after you service a car, but charge up the EV. Big brownie points for that. And right now is an excellent opportunity. Tesla set the pace. I know I said Tesla, sorry. They set the pace, but they produce so many cars, they're struggling keeping up with the service demand. And the customer service, it's on the brink. You guys have that infrastructure already. It's one of the reasons that I have the car that I have, because I have great service. They take care of me. A lot of my friends who have those cars, they're taken care of. So that's the opportunity. You've got that infrastructure already. Customers who are not early adopters, who are just regular folk looking because they want an EV now, that's what they're looking for. They don't want to have to worry about, I got to wait 2 months for what? Oh, wait, it's my problem? They don't want to hear that. They want to have a good experience. You have the opportunity right now.
Thanks. So I think we have to wrap up, but the last thing that we had spoken about was it's going to be a multi-speed transition. So resources like the gentleman up on the stage, resources like others in your dealer groups possibly to help learn from those early adopters. Just one last data point, you look at a market like San Francisco, they're currently at 5 times the national average. You look at a market like where I'm from, Detroit, we're at barely half the national average. So reach out, talk to those that have gone through it. use the resources available to you. And with that, I think we'll end it and thank Chris, Brad, Michael, and Chris. If you have any other questions, I know they'll be around, but we hope you have a great rest of the day. Thank
Can
you.
we do a mic
Thank you.
drop now?
Thank you.